everyone, and welcome to the ForeFlight 201 Advanced ForeFlight presentation. My name is Thomas Daugherty, and I am the Data QA lead for ForeFlight. I'm also a CFII and a commercial multi-engine pilot. I received my degree from the University of North Dakota, and that's also where I did all of my flight training. Before we get started here, I just want to point out that you can, of course, contact us at team@foreflight.com and get a hold of our pilot support team. They're all at least instrument-rated pilots, and they're all experts inside of ForeFlight. Today we're going to be going over some tips and tricks that we like to use in ForeFlight to make things a little bit easier for us as we go flying. So how does ForeFlight help me pre-flight? How does it help me stay ahead of the airplane when I'm actually in flight itself? And how do I get through a diversion? That's something that would normally be a very stressful situation, but using ForeFlight, I can make things a lot less stressful and focus on flying the airplane. And then we're going to point out a couple of things that are new. Today's flight is going to be between Salt Lake City and Seattle Tacoma. These are both a couple of large Class Bravo airports. There's a lot of weather, it's a long flight, and there's plenty of terrain for us to have to get around. So this is going to let us show off a lot of the tools inside of ForeFlight. The first thing is, how do we use the search box to plan a route, make things a little bit easier for us? So inside of ForeFlight, I'm sure most of you are familiar with using this box right here to create a route, and that works great. But today we're going to talk about how to use the search box in that upper right hand corner just to maybe fill in things a little bit faster. I can go ahead and put in my departure airport. I can put in anything about my route. So here we have a departure procedure, but maybe we have like a Victor Airway or anything else that we'd like to add in, and this is where I can put in that identifier. I can put my destination airport, and that's pretty much built a route for me. But then I can start adding things like the airspeed that I want to fly today, 170 knots. The gallons per hour that I'm going to be burning of 10.4. And the altitude that I'm pretty sure I'd like to fly. So let's try 8,000 out here and see how that works for us. We can even add the tail number of the aircraft. And that tail number, by putting that into my flight plan, is going to pull in all of the performance information that I've saved for that aircraft. So my climb performance, my descent performance, all of that's going to be brought in. I can even add something like my departure time. So here we have 4 p.m. And that's going to modify the winds aloft forecast that ForeFlight uses to give you an even more accurate flight plan information. When I hit enter, you can see that all of my information is added in there. I've got my departure procedure loaded. And then along the left-hand side of the screen, I also have my aircraft, my speed, my gallons, and my altitude loaded up. So this is a really quick way, if you already know the basis of your flight, to go ahead and really quickly enter that info. But let's say I don't know anything about my route. Well, in ForeFlight, we have something called the Route Advisor. And this is a great tool if you just know the destination and departure airports. So, direct route between Salt Lake and Seattle. And I see that on the right bar of my edit route box, I've got something that says routes. And 6 in there says I have 6 routes available to me. If I tap on that, I get a couple options here. I get airway information, and then I get ATC cleared. The ATC cleared options there are actual flight plans filed with ATC and accepted between these two airports. And you can see that it's a lot of airlines going through. Well, let's go ahead and select the airway and see what that does. And that loads up all of the airway and intersection information I need to get a complete route between these two airports. It's a really handy tool. Alongside that, we have something called the Altitude Advisor. So now that I know the route that I'd like to take, I need to know what altitude is going to be the fastest for me. So if I tap my altitude in the bottom left-hand corner, I bring up our Altitude Advisor. Now this uses my wind aloft information and the climb descent performance information that I've entered for my aircraft, and it's calculated what my exact headwind, time, and gallons it's going to take me to go through this whole flight. And we can see it looks like staying low is going to be best for us today. So we'll try and stay with a low altitude. The important thing to remember is that any time that I plan a route like this in ForeFlight, it syncs to all of the other devices. On my single subscription, I am allowed to have 2 iPads and an iPhone. And of course, those routes are going to pop up through all of it. And this is a really good way to keep that backup up to date and ready to go for my flight. Now we need to see if we can actually make this flight. So let's use weight and balance inside of ForeFlight to kind of do a couple of things and see what my fuel burn is going to be. So if I tap the More tab in the bottom right-hand corner, and then tap the Weight and Balance selector, I can choose the aircraft that we're flying today and see the weight and balance profile for that aircraft. Now I've set mine up a little different here. I've got all of the different people that I fly with on a regular basis and their weights already entered in, and that always is useful if I fly with the same people all the time. These are students of mine. I also have tabs and full fuel for the aircraft that we're flying. And I even have things like the summer gear that I normally fly with or the winter gear that I normally fly with. And this is, of course, all customizable and easily set up in our weight and balance tool. Let's go ahead and look at our fuel burn for the flight, though. So I'm going to go ahead and put full fuel in the aircraft. Looks like that's not going to be a problem for our weight and balance. But if I tap on that, I can see that I have an in-flight consumption option. And if I put in the fuel burn that we have calculated for the flight, I now can see my CG throughout the entire flight. I even see my zero fuel at the very bottom down there. And this is a good way to know that I'm going to be within my CG limits the entire time. Now, of course, inside of ForeFlight, everything is drag and drop. So I'm flying with Dominic today, but let's say Dominic wants to sit in the back seat. If I tap Edit, I can then drag Dominic down to the back seats there. And now he can sit in the back. And my CG is updated at any time I move somebody or select a new person. So we can see my CG moved aft there. And that's just a really handy way to adjust the flight setup that you've got so you have a good, solid CG. As I mentioned earlier, we've got quite a bit of terrain along our route, so let's use the hazard avoidance tools inside of ForeFlight to really keep an eye on that and make sure that we're going to be clear of everything. The first tool is Profile, and if you're a ForeFlight Pro subscriber, you have this option down the very bottom of your Edit Route box, and you can see the terrain profile along my entire route. We can even see things like my highest point, how far below the terrain I am in this case, and how far along my route that I'm actually going to have a problem. Let's take a closer look where that impact's going to take, and we can actually just pinch and zoom into the profile view, just like we do on the maps page, to see a closer zoom up of that terrain and get a little bit better picture of what we're looking at. Now, if I press and hold inside of the terrain profile there, I can actually bring up a spot point of that terrain right there. And I can now see exactly what my clearance is at that point. And even on my map, I get a little highlight along my route of where that terrain is. And this is really useful because it allows me to rubber band my route out of that terrain, or of course see what that terrain is and how high I'd have to go above it. And it's just a really good way to keep up to date on your terrain information. It looks like that 8,000 is probably not going to work for us, so let's go ahead and move up to 10,000. And all I need to do is select the altitude on the left side there and then slide it up to 10,000 feet. And I'll go ahead and clear that terrain. I also have the option to adjust the terrain profile settings by tapping the little gear icon in the bottom right-hand corner. From here, I can adjust the width of my corridor. So maybe I want a closer in corridor, maybe I want terrain information a little bit wider out. I can even adjust the altitude that I get alerts at. So normally I want 1,000 feet for yellow and 100 feet for red, but maybe I'm doing low-level operations today, and I don't want a whole bunch of yellow and red when I'm already close to the ground. So we can adjust that down to some of our lower altitudes. When I use Profile in flight alongside of our Hazard Advisor overlay, which we're looking at on the bottom, I get this really great complete picture of the terrain in my area, and it gives me a lot of information about, okay, Am I going to have a problem with terrain here? Do I need to climb, descend? And even how do I get out of this terrain? What corridors can I use to get out of this area? Something that we introduced to ForeFlight recently is our procedure preview. And you can bring that tool up by tapping the procedure button in the top right-hand corner. And this is a really great tool for what used to be a very complicated deal to get in and out of like large class Bravos with a lot of different departure and arrival procedures. This makes it a lot easier for me to see all of that. So I've got my route depicted on the right, and then I've got a selection of options on the left, from departures, arrivals, approach, traffic pattern, and even search and rescue if that's what I'm doing today. If I select departure, I now see a graphical representation of all of the departure procedures out of Salt Lake. And this is just a really nice tool to be able to see. I don't have to flip through pages anymore. I can see exactly where that procedure takes me. And all I need to do is select the one that looks like it's going to work best for me. Select any transitions that we have for it, and we don't have any for this particular departure. And then select the runway information of what runway I'm going to be departing from. The best thing is, because of course this is ForeFlight, we're going to go ahead and bring in that wind information to that departure procedure so you can see what you're most likely going to be taking off of. So it looks like 3-4s are the common runway today. Let's go ahead and select 3-4 left and add that to our route. And then we go back to the main screen, but we've got that departure procedure in there now. Let's go ahead and select arrival. And now I see the exact same thing. I get this great graphical depiction of all of the arrival procedures into Seattle. One of those looks like it's probably going to work a lot better for us. If we select the Chins one, we now have a couple of transition options. We'll select the one that works best for us and add that to our route. And now we're starting to get a little bit closer to an actual route here. So we've got a departure, and we're direct to our arrival. Well, let's go ahead and add in an approach and see how that works in ForeFlight also. I again bring in all of my wind information. I can see all of the approach procedures inside of ForeFlight. And when I select one, if I've got ForeFlight Pro, I get the geo-referenced approach plate loaded in here. This is where I can see all of my initial approach fixes, select the one that works best for me, and add that to my route. Now again with Pro, this is automatically going to be overlaid onto my chart, so I can see my exact route, and I'm all good to go, and I'm ready to go and now fly all my procedures and fly my approach into Seattle. One of the best things inside of ForeFlight is, of course, all of the weather layers that you have available. And one of my personal favorites is the radar layer. Occasionally, though, you get a cell that may cover up some important information on a chart. And in ForeFlight, we can fix that by selecting the little gear icon along the very top. And then in our quick settings, moving our radar opacity slider down to about right there. That's where I normally fly with. And now I can see both my radar cell and everything on the chart underneath. And this, of course, works for like my satellite layers, my TFRs, my AirMet segments, any of those kind of weather layers inside of ForeFlight. One of the best features that I like is Pack. Pack is a way for ForeFlight to make sure you have everything downloaded that you need for the flight. When I've got my route, I'm going to have a little suitcase icon with a red badge icon on it. And that tells me that I have things available to download. What Pack does is it looks at my route, it makes a corridor, 25 miles either side of course, and 50 nautical miles around my destination and departure. And if a state touches that, we think we need that state. So it looks at what I have already downloaded onto my iPad and says, this is what you have, and this is what you might need, and here's the difference. So here's all of the things that I don't have downloaded for this flight yet. A lot of different charts, and a lot of stuff that I'm definitely going to want. So all I need to do is tap Pack in the bottom right-hand corner, and ForeFlight will go ahead and download all of that stuff locally onto my iPad so that I don't need to go out and have an internet connection or anything like that. I'll have it all saved, and I can use it in flight. When we're all done, we'll get the all pack notification, and we're ready to go flying. With that, we're going to want to go ahead and file this flight plan. And filing inside of ForeFlight couldn't be any easier. With my route all ready to go, I'm going to tap the Send To icon. That's a little box with an up arrow on it. And it's going to bring up my options box here. One of those is File and Brief. Now I'm going to go ahead and send this flight plan to my File and Brief page in ForeFlight. And now I've taken all of that information I had on the Maps page and turned it into a flight plan form that I can now send off through Lockheed or DUATS to the FAA and get this flight plan in. I, of course, can edit anything that's in here. So if I look at my aircraft, I can adjust my information about that aircraft. And this is a good place to enter in that climb and descent information. And when I'm all ready to go, I can either get an official weather briefing or I can file my flight plan. And when I file my flight plan, I'll get some notifications that it was successfully filed. And I'll even get notifications that it was approved by ATC, all ready to go flying. Recently in ForeFlight, we updated our flight notifications. So these are things that happen after you file, but before you go flying. So new TFRs, new AirMets, new SIGMETs. This is a great thing to be able to look at to keep alert on your flight. And it used to be in text form, but we recently updated it to now graphical flight notifications. So if I could select my AirMet, I now see a graphical representation of that AirMet, along with all of the text information that I used to have. And that just makes it a lot easier for me to be able to look at this info and see if it's going to affect my flight, affect my go, no-go decision. Once I've looked at all of these flight notifications, I'm going to see that I have 0 new flight notifications at the top. I'm all caught up on the flight and ready to go. And if I still want to go flying, we'll have all that info. Thanks to our close partnership with Lockheed Martin, we have a couple of options where I can now actually cancel and amend, or if I'm flying VFR, I can even open and close that flight plan. I like to use this a lot if I get a flight notification back from ATC and from FlightAware that says I'm going to be on a different route than what I already filed, so maybe not direct to. I'll go ahead and amend my flight plan with that new route, and that way when I walk out to the airplane, I just get a clear as filed, and I'm on my way. I don't have to scramble to put in all that new info and copy it down. When I go to amend, I'll get a couple options here. So if I don't want to amend my flight plan, I can definitely discard the changes, or I can just refile them, and it'll be all good to go. Canceling works just like filing. I'll get a cancel your flight plan notification, and then ForeFlight will go ahead and tell me that that flight plan has officially been canceled. So there's a lot of things inside of ForeFlight that I can put as layers, like obstacles, traffic, things like that. And I can look up more information about each of those objects simply by tapping on them. So we're looking at my obstacle layer here, and I've tapped on this large tower off to the southwest, and I can see the exact height of the tower, both in MSL and AGL, and more information about it, like how is it lit, and that just makes it really easy for me if I'm looking for this target that I don't want to run into. It helps to know what I'm trying to look for. And this works the same with traffic. If I select traffic, I'll get information such as heading, speed, and even their distance from me. And that just makes it a lot easier to scan outside the windows and keep up to date on where all that traffic is. So, an in-flight reroute. We've all gone through them as IFR pilots and even definitely as VFR pilots. And it can be something that's not necessarily easy, but it'll make it a lot easier with ForeFlight to get back onto your route. So we're flying along, and either weather, train, ATC, maybe my student just was really bad and got us pretty far off route today. We want to go ahead and get back on that airway. So looking at the route, Dryad looks like a pretty good waypoint for us to rejoin the course on. So what I'm going to do is on my nav log at the very top, I'm going to scroll down till I see the arrow that points towards Dryad. And then once I select that arrow, I get this change plan box. I have the option to either fly the leg that leads to Dryad, or to give myself a direct to Dryad course. And if we select that, we actually remove everything before that waypoint in our flight plan, but keep everything after, and give ourselves a direct two-leg to that waypoint. And this is a really good way if ATC gives you like a corner cut or anything like that, that you can get back on course really quick and not have to replan an entire flight. But that looks like a pretty shallow intercept angle. I kind of want to get back on that airway a little bit faster. So let's talk about one of the ways that we can put in a custom waypoint. And I'm going to use a radial DME for this. So we'll use the Tango Whiskey Foxtrot VOR. I'll put in the identifier of the fix that I want, the radial that I want off of that fix, and the DME, 45 miles here, from that point. And now that's gone ahead and created a waypoint at that radial DME for me. But this is the wrong order. So all I need to do is to reorder my flight plan is to press and hold on that new waypoint I created and slide it up to where I want, so between Dryad and my direct to waypoint. And now we can see that I've got a much steeper intercept angle onto that airway, and then from there on course. This works great off of VORs, but it also works off NDPs or even airports to give myself a bearing to that. Okay, the diversion. As a double I'm familiar with giving these to students, and as a student, I remember it not being my favorite. You're all set up and ready to go on an approach, or all set up to go into an airport, and something happens. Something changes your mind about continuing with the flight. I'm flying along, and we're on course, and we just passed over Boise not that long ago. And something happens that makes us decide that we're not going to continue on this flight. We want to get on the ground soon. Not an emergency, but we need to not be in the air for a whole lot longer. The first thing to do is to turn on our flight categories layer. And that just kind of lets me know what the weather around me is. Looks like I've got quite a bit of IFR. It also kind of highlights airports that I have weather information from. In flight, of course, I'm getting this from any of the ADSB receivers, like the Stratus or the Flight Stream. Give me this info in flight. A tool that I like to use to plan a diversion like this is called the distance rings. And I can bring that up from the quick settings and turn my distance rings on. And personally, I have mine set up in time. So I have 5, 10, and then up in the top corner there, 30 minutes out. This is based off my current ground speed. And we'll show you how to set up time on these distance rings a little bit later. But this lets me know that I'm about, between 10 and 15 minutes from Boise. So it's not too bad. That's a pretty quick diversion to get me down there. If I tap on the red dot for Boise, I'll pull up weather information for that specific airport. Because I have a weather layer turned on, I automatically just go to the weather page for that airport. I can see that we've got some pretty good IFR. Now, the info tab on the bottom left, when I go into an airport like this, I'm going to need information like my approach frequencies, tower frequencies, who I'm going to talk to as I make my way in. And this is a quick way to get that information and get talking to somebody that's going to be able to guide me to the airport. One of the other tools that really helps is the ruler. I bring up the ruler inside of ForeFlight by taking 2 fingers and pressing them against the screen at the same time, and then moving that over, in this case, my airplane marker and the airport I want to fly to. With that, I get information such as the magnetic heading, the distance to that waypoint, the time and fuel burn based on my current ground speed, and I can see that ground speed there. This is a good way to go ahead and get a heading to get turned towards that course and get on my way on that diversion, which is very important. Now, to get an actual route to that airport, we're going to use our edit route box and a quick shortcut to enter in a direct to route. All I need to do is enter the letter D and then hit space, and now I've added in the coordinates of my current location. This allows me to use a direct to very quickly. We'll add in Boise, and now I've got a nice little direct to route that takes me directly to the airport. We'll bring up that procedures preview that we looked at earlier. And we're a little close for the arrival, so we'll go ahead and select approaches. And here we'll look at the VOR DME to 10 right. You can see all of my initial approach fixes, and one of them is pretty obviously a little bit better for us. It's right along our route, so we'll go ahead and select Emmet. And because I have ForeFlight Pro, it automatically brings up that approach plate onto my chart with all of the waypoints loaded in. Using synthetic vision, our plates on maps, and hazard advisor, I get this really great picture that allows me to make an approach in terrain to an airport with parallel runways, get lined up, make sure I'm on the right one, and see all of this extra info, get that complete picture of the situation, and just makes what should be a stressful situation of making an approach that I wasn't planning on. I wasn't planning on going to this airport. We diverted to there. A lot easier. I don't have to worry about, am I lined up on the right thing? Did I read something wrong? I have all this extra info to bring that up. Alright, so we've landed after our diversion. When wheels touch the ground, we've all been there. The adrenaline kind of drains out of the body, and we lose the ability to think. And ForeFlight's going to help us out there a little bit. It's going to automatically bring up our airport diagram. Again, with Pro, I'm going to have my airplane icon on that chart. And this is going to help us really get, to our parking spot and out of the airplane. First, though, I'm going to check the NOTAMs at the very top. All I need to do is tap that NOTAMs box, and then I can see all of the NOTAMs for this specific diagram. So that just makes it where I'm just looking at my taxiways, my runways. A lot easier than trying to sort through a complete list of all of the NOTAMs for the airport. I also have our new FBO button along the top. And tapping that is going to show me the location of all of the FBOs on this diagram. And tapping on one of them is going to give me information about their fuel. I can look at photos of it or comments from other pilots, information about this FBO to let me know if that's actually where I want to go. If it is, let's go ahead and tap the pin icon along the very top and then use my finger, and I can actually trace the route to that FBO. And either ATC gives it to me or this is just the route I want to take. And now I've basically given myself progressive taxi. I just use my airplane icon in this course to just track straight to that FBO. Once we're all done, let's go ahead and look at our track log, and we can review this flight. We can use this as a training tool, either as an instructor, or I use it whenever I fly myself as kind of a self-diagnostic, a way to look at how I've been flying and know what I have to work on. So I just tap on any of my track logs, and I see information about it. And I can view this in ForeFlight.com over any of the charts that we have available. Or, my personal favorite, hit the Send To button, hit Open In, and then select Google Earth. And now I can see a complete 3D representation of that track. Here we're doing some traffic pattern work out of Boise. And it works really well. I can see, one of my patterns, I cut a little short on my crosswind. I can see that I've got a little high on a couple of them. My altitudes are off. It's just a really great tool to be able to kind of self-analyze how those circuits are going. So, some other tips and tricks. Before we got started with this presentation, we went around the office to ForeFlight, and we asked everybody, what your favorite tip inside of ForeFlight? What's your favorite little trick that you use to make things easier? And this is that list. So the first is the ability to share routes back and forth between iPads. You can do this off of any Wi-Fi network, so the Stratus 2S or just the FBO's Wi-Fi. And I hit the Send To button that I normally would on the Maps page, and instead of selecting File and Brief, I select another iPad. My other iPad's going to get a little notification that it's trying to receive a route, and if I tap View Route, I will load that onto my other iPad. I also have the ability to send it to mail. If I select that, I create an email that I can send to family or friends or pilots that are somewhere else. And if they have ForeFlight, they can actually click that blue link and it'll open it inside of their ForeFlight. Recently, we added our Map Touch feature, and it's a great tool to be able to see different information about charts. On my Maps page, in the Quick Settings, I have the Map Touch Action box on the very bottom. Selecting that gives me the three options. I can do nothing, I can bring chart to front, I can bring chart to front with legends. If I have it selected to no action, ForeFlight acts like it's always acted. If I select bring chart to front, I can adjust the order of how the charts are stitched together to see different information. But if I select bring chart to front with legends, I now have the legends along the side of the chart that we used to get on paper. And there's some really good important information on there as far as different symbols, ATC airspace info, things like MOAs and restricted. So it's some really good info about the chart. So earlier we looked at our ruler tool and we looked at profile inside of ForeFlight. But if we combine the two, we can do something pretty cool. So I've got my profile open and I'm moving my ruler tool around on the screen, and my profile along the top there updates to what's underneath my ruler. This is a great tool to be able to use to decide, am I going to be able to make it over a pass? Am I going to be able to, make it through this valley area without actually having to reroute my whole flight plan to get that profile on there. I use this all the time when I'm planning a flight. The instrument panel inside of ForeFlight is the bar along the very bottom down there, and I fly with it open all the time. It's got lots of great information in it. You can change any of that information by simply tapping on that entry. So tapping on distance to destination will allow me to change it to something else. And one of my favorites that I like to fly with is nearest airport. This is relative position from the nearest airport. Selecting that's going to give me some good information. ATC calls up and asks for a position report or anything like that. I'll have that information right there at my fingertips and good to go. So we talked about bringing a plate up earlier in ForeFlight, and we've all been there where ATC suddenly decides that we're not going to be flying that approach. We're going to be flying a different approach. So to switch plates, all I need to do is tap on my georeference plate, and I get this box to pop up. And it's got all of the information, like I can slide the opacity down, I can hide the plate, get rid of it completely. I can view it full screen, send it to the plates view, or I can just select a different approach. The VOR goes out, I can just select the RNAV, and I automatically load up the RNAV approach onto my maps page. The settings page in ForeFlight has a lot of different options that can really help customize the experience you have inside of ForeFlight to how you fly. Make it yours. Earlier we talked about the distance rings and how I personally have mine set up for time. How did I get that? So on the More settings page here, one of the options is distance ring styles. If I select that, I can see that I can go from between distances, between times, and personally I like the 5, 10, and 30 minute option there. It gives me a good picture of where the aircraft's going to be. But if I select some time or some distances, I can see that information too. Here's 10, 20, and 50 miles out. You'll also notice the little green triangle there, and that's actually my track along the ground. So that's where I'm going to be if I stay on my current course when I reach that point. Extended Centerlines in ForeFlight are an excellent tool when I go into an airport I'm unfamiliar with or an airport with a lot of runways, and I want to make sure that I'm lining up on the correct one. I can turn it on from the settings page by just moving the slider there, and now I can see all of the runways kind of exploded out for this airport with all of the numbers and identifiers on it. This allows me to really easily get myself lined up on the correct runway or know what runway traffic's calling out for. Just makes a busy airport a lot easier to get around. Track Vector works a lot along the lines of the distance ring and is an excellent tool for getting back on course or knowing how my intercept's going. I can adjust it by selecting the track vector length and then selecting in the options that we have here. If I go with 10 miles, I now see my track vector alongside the airplane, and I can see my course. This allows me to pick an intercept angle and see exactly when I'm going to intercept that course. So here's kind of a fun one. The current location marker is the little blue icon in ForeFlight that tells me where my GPS position is. But I can change what that looks like. So if I go to current location marker down at the bottom, I can select either the aircraft that I am flying today or the aircraft that I wish I was flying today. Kind of customize ForeFlight for you. So the Hazard Advisor that we looked at earlier in ForeFlight is a really great tool. It gives us that excellent top-down information about all of the terrain in our area. But we don't want that to turn on too early. When we're on the ground, we're going to get all red, and that's not going to give us any good info. So we can adjust the speed at which that becomes active by selecting the Hazard Advisor option, and then adjusting the speed to, personally I like it, a little bit above my rotation speed. And then when I'm on the ground and I'm taxiing, getting ready for takeoff, Hazard Advisor is going to be disabled below that speed. And after I take off, then all of that red and yellow for the terrain is going to appear. So let's talk about a couple of things that are new to ForeFlight. First off, at Sun and Fun, we announced ForeFlight Web. This is our web-based portal, and it's a great way to do flight planning on your home computer, larger screen with mouse and keyboard. It's currently in beta right now, but if you'd like to go to foreflight.com/web, you can sign up for the beta and give us some great feedback on what tools and features you'd like to see inside of our web portal. We also expanded our ForeFlight Connects program to all of the providers you see on here, including now Garmin Flight Stream. This allows me to go ahead and connect to my flight stream, and then through that, I can connect to my Garmin 430, my 530, maybe a GDL88 to get some ADS-B info. This is a huge tool for us to be able to use, and we're really excited about that. We also recently announced our partnership with Apario, the Stratus 1S and 2S. These are updates to the old Stratus 1 and 2. This is how I can get good subscription-free ADS-B weather and traffic. The Stratus 2S has a built-in AHRS and even a pressure altitude sensor now to just really kind of build out ForeFlight and give me some powerful tools. So we've covered quite a bit here today, but there's always more to learn about ForeFlight, and there's several things that I can do to get better at it. The first thing is to read through the pilot's guide, which is available in the documents catalog inside the application. And that's going to be a complete breakdown of all of the features and functionality of the app, and we update it every time we put out a new version. As an instructor, of course, I recommend going couch flying. Sit at home and get used to flying with ForeFlight, and that way you can be familiar with it when you get into the air, and it's not something new that you're trying to figure out when you're actually in the airplane. To help out with that, we allow ForeFlight to connect to several different flight sims: X-Plane, Flight Simulator, Infinite Flight. And these are all great tools to sit at home and kind of couch fly, get more used to ForeFlight. You can, of course, watch any of our videos from foreflight.com/videos and see this and more. And, of course, you can always contact us at team@foreflight.com with any questions you have about ForeFlight. Our pilot support team is standing by ready to answer. That's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you at another ForeFlight webinar here soon.